Let's talk about it. Let's break it down. Let's analyze it. We do this. I'm so excited to welcome Elex Michaelson to the show. He anchors Fox 11 News in Los Angeles. He hosts and produces the political talk show The Issue Is. And so you've seen him all over the place. He's been on the Mark Thompson show before, and he's so kind enough to join us again. It's Elex Michaelson, everybody. Hi. Hi, I'm having a hard time hearing you. I don't know, your volume seems to be a little low.
Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Anything?
Oh, getting a little better, I think. Maybe Albert can turn you up a little bit on our end.
I'll move this up and I'll
perfect.
talk too loud.
Perfect. That's great. So
what the president should have done last night.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Elex, I couldn't understand what he was saying. I'm a Biden supporter. I think one of the things you need in order to be a good president is to be a strong communicator. And I couldn't understand what the president of the United States was saying last night. Now, I'm voting for the guy anyway, but if there was anybody on the fence, what happened?
Well, and there's an argument that you can be good at governing without necessarily being a great communicator, but you can't win the job to govern if you're not a strong communicator. That's part of the deal. That's what being president is. You have to be able to put a sentence together. You have to be able to make a point. And there was a lot that Donald Trump said that a lot of folks on the left were very frustrated by, but the president did not have the ability to, in the moment, put it back in his face.
Yeah.
And most Democrats, including Joe Biden several years ago, would have had several moments there when Trump said things where he could have made Trump the issue. And this race, if the Democrats can make Donald Trump the issue, the Democrats have a good chance of winning this race. But if Joe Biden's age is the issue,
right,
the Democrats aren't going to win this race. And last night, Joe Biden's age was very much the issue. They did this debate early because they were so concerned about the poll numbers in the swing states and concerns about his age. They wanted to disprove that to everybody. And instead, what ended up happening was he made it way worse.
I was really surprised because it was not the same President Biden that we saw at the State of the Union address. That's what I've been thinking. Yeah, he's older, but he's sharp. He's with it. He's able to stand up in front of, America and the legislature and give a fiery speech and handle people that are in the audience trying to heckle him. He was great at the State of the Union. What happened between then and now?
I don't know, especially because he took a week, to prepare for this.
Right.
I had seen him in person a few weeks ago at that big fundraiser that he did with Obama and Jimmy Kimmel and George Clooney and Julia Roberts in downtown LA. And Biden looked old and frail, and his voice was not very strong. And there were a lot of people in the audience, Democratic strategists among them, who were concerned about him. But he had just come off of a trip to Europe. He had just come off a huge flight from Italy to Los Angeles. The press corps was exhausted. I would be exhausted in that scenario. So everybody kind of gave him a mulligan, saying, all right, well, when he gets some rest, he'll be better. He had a week to rest. And this is what ended up happening. And it's interesting that the White House leaked that he had a cold halfway through the debate. If he really had a cold, why not say that before the debate?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I think.
The moment that he started to speak and his voice sounded so weak that the Democrats were going to have a problem.
And that's the problem with having a weak voice or having a feeble sounding voice is Trump was not very forthcoming. I would say he had a lot of lies to spew. Okay. And he wasn't fact checked on any of them, which is why you've got to, as the opposing candidate, come out strong against that. So Trump was asked about January 6th. He managed to turn the question around, right? He had this, he was mentally with it enough to do the spin, right? Not going to answer the question, but let me tell you what I want you to know about. In that moment, you would expect in the rebuttal that President Biden would be able, talking about January 6th, there should be outrage and there should be horror, but his voice and his presence wasn't strong enough to fight against it. I was watching ABC last night, and one of the things that the anchors and analyst Terry Moran was saying is that President Biden needed to look vigorous and strong in his fight against Trump's lies, and that he just wasn't able to show either of those traits.
Yeah, and he wasn't really helped by the fact that the approach that the moderators took was, they were kind of invisible. You don't really think about, which in some ways is good. Like, you don't really want to see the umpires. The umpires shouldn't be the story. But it wasn't what we've seen in past instances with Trump debates, or even when he was doing it with Chris Wallace, where there was a lot of back and forth and the moderator was super involved. Trump basically abided by the rules. And they asked their question and kind of get out of the way and let him do what he was going to do. The format allowed, if Trump didn't answer a question, for Biden to then take his rebuttal minute and push him on the fact that he didn't answer the question. And there weren't a lot of examples of him doing that.
No, they had to bring in Vice President Kamala Harris on all the news shows last night to kind of do some damage control over what happened. And one of the things I heard some Democratic pundits say is there's all kinds of scuttlebutt right now about how to get him to step aside and let somebody else run. One of the comments that came in from Michael Schur, who's another political commentator we have here weekly on the show, he said another tricky thing for Democrats is Harris. If you get Biden to stand down, you have to get to her as well. Passing over a black woman for Governor Newsom or Governor Whitmer or Buttigieg would not help with apathetic black support for Democrats. He said it's fascinating, all of it. So even if President Biden somehow steps down, then we are left with Vice President Harris, which I think is fine. I like her. But I guess in the polls, some people think she's not likable. I don't know if she's going to be able to beat Trump and be the candidate. What do we do?
Well, and part of the challenge is, if you look at the polls right now, Harris does worse against Trump than Biden. We'll see if that changes after this debate that we just had. If Biden's numbers slip even lower, then maybe there would be that conversation. But that's sort of been, in some ways, almost like an insurance policy for Joe Biden to stay at the top of the ticket. If he had a very popular younger vice president who most people wanted in that job, the logical and easiest thing to do would not be to have an open convention and have a bunch of chaos in the streets of Chicago. The easiest thing to do would be to resign the presidency and make her the incumbent president. She would be the first black female president in the job as commander-in-chief. She would win the nomination, unanimous consent. And give her all the resources and the whole team get behind her and give her a new VP, and away we go. But
whoa. So you're saying don't just step aside from being the candidate, step aside now from being the president.
I'm not saying one way or another. I'm just saying if they felt that she was the person, that would give her the best chance to win.
Sure.
If you looked at it that way, so far, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like they think that she's the strongest person, which is why that hasn't happened. But, we don't know what's going to happen next. We've never seen anything like this in American history, but it is clear, and we should point this out to the audience, that under the rules of the Democrats, Joe Biden is the nominee until Joe Biden doesn't want to be the nominee.
Right.
The delegates, all of them, are pledged to him. He's the nominee. And if he's even getting outside pressure in the New York Times and all these people are telling him not to do it, as long as he wants to do it, there's almost no mechanism to push him out. People are thinking, oh, this is all a plot, and this is Newsom and the DNC, and they are going to replace him. Who is they? Who are this they that the Republicans have been talking about for weeks? The party elders? Who's older than Joe Biden? Like, who is this force that's able to replace him? He is the nominee unless he gets so much outside pressure, or maybe a key stakeholder like a Nancy Pelosi or a Jim Clyburn or a Barack Obama, somebody with enormous weight and gravitas who isn't a potential presidential candidate, comes forward and say, Joe, it's time to go. That would give cover to everybody else. But even today, there's not a single that I know of major elected Democratic official in the country that's calling for Joe Biden to drop out.
How important is one single debate? I mean, it seemed kind of earth-shattering to me at the time. But now we're, new day. We're looking forward. We've got a president who's still surrounding himself with all the people that will do all the things Democrats want. We have all the policies that Democrats want being carried forth. So how important is that one debate when it comes to what's going on, but also when it comes to the election?
Yeah, I mean, historically, one debate hasn't been all that important. And if you look at the historical trends, almost always the incumbent president struggles in their first debate because they're not used to being challenged. Barack Obama had a very bad first debate. He was an incumbent. George W. Bush had a very bad debate against John Kerry when he was an incumbent. George H.W. Bush had that famous moment when he was looking at his watch against Bill Clinton. All of them lost debates. Now, there are some key differences here. In those situations, there were other debates that were soon after. So it wasn't like a long time to stew on that. That's important. Number two, we don't know that there's going to be another debate. Donald Trump previously, we saw last year when he was ahead in the polls, decided not to debate. And if he goes up big time in the polls after this, why would he do that again? So he just may say, nope, not going to show up. I don't need to. So he may not get that opportunity to do this again. And what made this particular thing so bad for Biden is Biden was losing going into this debate. He was behind in every swing state. And if the election was held the day before the debate, he would have lost. That's why they asked to do this debate, because they wanted to reset the narrative. And now it is hard to imagine how after that debate performance, he's picked up new supporters in other parts of the country, those swing states. So something has to happen in a very dramatic way to shape the narrative and completely change the dynamic. And in our media universe these days, where everything is so fragmented, there are very, very, very few moments where everybody's watching the same thing.
Yes.
Last night was one of those moments, maybe the only moment, and especially the first 10, 15 minutes when people are really tuning in. And that's the image that they got of him. And I think that's going to be hard for a lot of people to get out of their mind.
So now we have people looking toward vice presidents, and we touched on Vice President Harris. How important is the vice presidential pick for Trump? Which is, we should know in just the next, week or two, probably.
I don't think it's that important. Usually vice presidents don't, from a statistical perspective, matter that much. I think Trump is a solo act, and the Democratic Party is an ensemble act. And we saw how much he loved his last vice president, who isn't even supporting him this time. So, and if he picks somebody like Doug Burgum, who, if I had to bet money, I think he will pick, but who knows, is a nice guy, did our show, governor of North Dakota, sort of straight out of central casting, rich white guy, who was kind of going to stand in the background, decent on TV, but not that flashy, and just kind of going to go about his day. I don't think that really shakes up very much at all. I don't know. What do you think?
I think you got it exactly right when you called Trump a solo act and the Democrats an ensemble act. That's very, very true. And I think Trump supporters are diehard, rabid Trump fans, and it doesn't matter who he picks, they're going to vote for him.
Yeah.
Last night, golf. Can we just talk about that moment? They're fighting over golf. And at that moment, I thought, not only has this debate gone off the rails, now it just crashed and burned. What happened there? They're fighting over a golf game.
Burn way before the golf.
I'm like, this is where we've gone?
Yeah, it was just bad. But it was like I saw somebody write on there that on social media that there were all these lies and everything else, and the thing that Biden got most upset about was attacking his handicap. It was finally pushback.
He did have some strong moments when Trump kind of he was talking about his son, about Beau Biden, right? well, he wasn't talking about Beau Biden, but he was talking about members of the military. And President Biden turned around and said, my son isn't a loser. My son, was a great man. That was a strong moment. But there really weren't enough of those. And even in the strong moments, the voice sounded feeble.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what the Democrats are going to do now. It feels like they're, like you say, they're going to have someone with gravitas ask him to step aside. And then what about all the people that already voted in the primaries for President Biden? And are they going to feel like their voice wasn't heard? And it's just a mess.
It is a mess. And you're right that if the Democrats just sort of anoint somebody who hasn't gone through that process of going out and actually interacting with voters, of being in debates, of being vetted by the media, all the rest of that, I think there are a lot of people that aren't going to feel a lot of buy-in to that person. I mean, but the other argument is, if it really looks like, Joe Biden is the political equivalent of a dead man walking and can't win against Trump, and you really believe, which I know many of the people watching this right now believe, that Donald Trump is not only bad, but an existential threat to the country, then is that person the best person to beat him? And if you really believe that the country itself is at stake, don't you want the strongest person possible defending the country? And that's, I think, what the Democrats have to think about. So far, up until this moment, they have thought, in large part, by their actions, that Joe Biden is the best person to defeat Donald Trump because he's the only one who's done it before. Is that still true today? That's a big question.
I have a friend who I do the show before this one with, and she said she would weekend at Bernie's President Biden before she would ever vote for Trump. But Governor Gavin Newsom was on the talk shows last night, and he said, and this is a quote, "I would never turn my back on President Biden, and I don't know a Democrat in my party that would do so, especially," and he was talking last night, "after tonight." He said, "We're going to double down in the next few months. We're going to win this election." So he is optimistic. But there was a poll done about optimism.
He said what he said was optimistic.
What he said was optimistic. Maybe he doesn't really feel optimistic, but he came off that way. A lot of people, though, according to a poll that was quoted on ABC, after the debate, they don't feel optimistic. They feel kind of disillusioned with what's happening in America, and that's important.
They didn't feel optimistic going into it. I mean, Democrats have ignored the fact that for over a year, more than 2/3 of voters, including Democrats, have said that they're concerned about Joe Biden's age and they don't want him to be the nominee. And yet there was no serious contest against him. The DNC did not allow any debates in the primary for the folks that were running. RFK felt so alienated by it, he decided to run as an independent. And the entire party apparatus and all of the elected officials in the country got in line and have been saying for months that Joe Biden is so great behind the scenes, you just haven't seen it yet. Wait till you see it. And now they're in this position. So their voters have, in poll after poll after poll, said that this is something that they were concerned about. And the Democrats have not listened to their own voters.
No, as a matter of fact, and I'll put this up because Trevor gives us $10, and he says Biden sounded kind, soft-spoken, and an old man because he is. Trump sounded like a crazy old loudmouth because he is. But what's interesting about that, and thank you, Trevor, is that I don't think when people walk away and you say now they're going to have a long time to stew over it, which is likely true, they're not going to walk away thinking about lies or half-truths or zingers that were, given out by Trump last night. I think the general consensus when you walk away from that debate is, oh gosh, President Biden is really old. Is he too old? And that's what we're thinking. That was the takeaway from last night. That's what all of America took away from that debate.
It's a vibe check. I mean, I said before the debate that the most important thing, I put this out on Twitter, was for Joe Biden to show that he was strong and coherent. Yep. And if he did that early on, then people would listen to everything that he was saying. And he has a good chance to win. If he doesn't do that, he probably can't win the election.
Yeah.
And the sad part for Biden fans is he didn't. And not only, it was also sad for him, honestly, the two shot, that CNN kept him on camera, even when Trump was speaking.
And his mouth was agape, and he
right,
looked like, even when he was standing there saying nothing, he
right.
looked like this old person, really old person, ancient.
And it was so distracting
Yeah.
for anybody watching on TV that they couldn't listen to what Trump was saying, which usually would be the story. It's interesting. I had a colleague of mine who was coming in late and listened to the first half of the debate on the radio and said, you know, it's not that bad. And then she sat down and watched the second half on TV, and she was startled by the visuals.
Right.
Most people in the country were watching it on TV or on their computer screens or on their phones, and they saw the visuals.
So it's like that Nixon moment where he came out in the debate all sweaty and looking all squirrely. And a lot of people said that's what lost him the election. Is this that moment?
Well, and of course, in that debate in 1960, the first televised debate, the only other televised debate that was in a studio without an audience, people that watched it on TV thought that Kennedy won. People that listened on the radio thought that Nixon had won. In this debate, I think people that watched it on TV and that listened probably thought that Donald Trump won. Is that moment? We'll see. I mean, there's a long time between now and then. A lot can change in politics. We learned in 2016 we should never make predictions.
Yeah.
But I am confident in saying this: if the election were held today, Joe Biden would lose significantly, and probably lose almost every single swing state.
That's really, really scary to me. And I don't know what the Democrats can do now to shore this up.
Yeah, I mean, there are different options, and we'll see. But maybe some of it seems like their attempt, at least so far today, is let's put our head down and try to ride through it. And Joe Biden has risen from the political dead many times before. He's been underestimated many times before, and he's continued to sort of rise from the ashes. And they're hoping that this will be another example of it. But it is tough to spin.
Elex Michaelson, you are awesome. We'll tune in to The Issue Is, which is on stationed throughout the state of California. We can see it here in Northern California, just like you can down in the Southland.
Yeah, we're on KTVU in the Bay Area on Sunday mornings at either 5:30 or 6:30 a.m., depending on the week and what else is on the air. And you can watch it on YouTube as well, youtube.com/Elex Michaelson. And we did an entire debate post show last night featuring Chris Matthews, my pal Melanie Mason from Politico, and John Cobalt from the John and Ken Show, and all of that. And so people can watch that on YouTube right now if they want. And tonight we'll have commentary as well from Kara Swisher is going to be joining me, along with John Favreau from Pod.
Oh, that's going to be great. So it's going
to be a really good show.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. There it is, the YouTube channel.
Thank you.
The Issue Is with Elex Michaelson. Thank you for being here on the Mark Thompson Show. Every time we put out the bat signal, you always answer, and I really appreciate it.
Well, I love your show and love doing it. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Have a great day. Bye, Elex.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.